talk US politics, Trump and Biden, they're both polling pretty well right now. I'm not sure which one to be more surprised by.
Yeah, look, this is a real good week for the old guys, the old middle-aged, well, more than middle-aged white guys.
That,
yeah. So let's take Biden first. So a couple of weeks ago, the narrative was that Biden was losing his position as the front runner in the Democratic Party. He's the most centrist of the Democrats. That would help him in an election with Trump, but the idea was he couldn't win over the Democratic base and the activists. They would all go for a left-winger like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. But it's pretty clear that Warren and Sanders would really struggle to win a general election. Now, Biden, in fact, has reconsolidated his position. He's opened up a pretty good lead over both Warren and Sanders, and he is leading in New Hampshire among Democrats and in the other early primary states. Now, I watched the other day his Iowa town hall, and I thought it was a brilliant performance. He hasn't been great in edgy debates, but George W. Bush wasn't very good in debates, and Donald Trump was said to have lost all the debates to Hillary Clinton. You know, the actual effect that debates have on the electorate is quite complex. Biden is folksy and he's likeable. He doesn't go in for all the woke intersectional political nuttiness that so many Democrats go in for. I mean, he's a kind of orthodox Democrat. He'll genuflect before all those causes. But when he talks about veterans, it's he doesn't have to say, and I mean gay or transgender, veterans of colour, who represent 6 other minorities. He just doesn't have to tick all those boxes. He just says veterans. And he plays very well with working class voters in the Midwest. But on the other hand, the story is also good for Trump. Trump has been hurt by these impeachment hearings, and his overall approval ratings have slightly declined, although he's holding his base pretty well. But actually, in all the key Midwestern states, which were the key to his victory last time, he's polling pretty well. So he's a long way behind in the national polls against any of the Democrats, even against Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. But in the Midwestern states, he's polling very, very well. He's either just ahead or it's dead even. So Biden is the candidate who would have the best chance of beating him, but Trump is, even at this stage, at what is probably the height of impeachment damage, holding his own very well in the Midwest. So this is intensely unpredictable.
Yes, and feeling, I guess, a lot like the last election in one sense, but this time we have learnt the lesson of writing people off because of those polls. Just finally, Greg, last weekend, the 30th anniversary of the Berlin Wall, of course, coming down. What a simple time in one sense in politics. So many people around the world, hearts aglow at this particular moment. What have your reflections been?
Well, the defeat of communism was a magnificent triumph for the West. And because, broadly speaking, I hate using these simplistic terms, but broadly speaking, cultural production in the West is dominated by, the kind of left liberal tendency. So they have basically whited communism out of our historical memory. The world is rightly obsessed with the memory of Nazism, as it should be. But you never ever hear of communism now. You wouldn't know that, according to the well-researched Black Book of Communism, communist regimes in the 20th century were responsible for 100 million deaths through direct executions, communist wars, and forced state famines. In the Soviet Union,
just terrible
in
policies.
China, the genocide of the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge were a perfectly orthodox communist party supported by the Vietnamese communists and the Chinese communists until they actually attacked the Vietnamese. Now, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the West has lost a lot of influence and a lot of elan and morale and civic purpose. But I was surprised at the subdued nature of the remembrance, because not only was this an incredible triumph of the West, but the evil that was communism. Communism was as evil as Nazism. They were twin ideologies, and too many people in the West were friends of communism. Manning Clark, the historian, wrote this ridiculous book, Meeting Soviet Man. He said Lenin was a Christ-like figure and so forth. And somehow or other, imagine if there was some hero of the Liberal Party who had written a lovely book about Adolf Hitler. It would be an icon of our culture. but Manning Clark having lionised Lenin and so on, barely even mentioned in the biographies. So I think we have undertaken a damaging episode of amnesia in forgetting about just how utterly evil and vicious and what a big threat communism was.